Hey guys, it's Kelly. If you bake cakes like I used to, you'll love this video because I'm going to show you how to make the easiest cake that looks super difficult. People will even tell you it's the best cake they've ever had. And yeah, trust me. Okay. So you'll also see in the description box at the bottom of this video a link to my blog. I'll have all of the ingredients listed that I used and all of the tools that I used as well. Most of the tools that I use are Wilton, and I did take cake decorating classes at a craft store. I only took 3, and I can't say it made me a master cake maker. I don't sell my cakes, but I do make them for family and people do really enjoy them, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Okay, I'm going to go through really quick the tools that you'll need to make this cake. I'll show you how to make one of the cakes, even though I'm going to make 3. Then I'll show you how to assemble the cake. It's very easy. I'll make it quick and you'll enjoy it. Alright, first you'll need at least one 12-inch cake circle. You may feel free to make your own out of cardboard. You don't have to use a circle, I just really like them. You'll need 3 cake mixes. For this cake, I'm doing 3 different flavors of chocolate cake: milk chocolate, chocolate fudge, devil's food. You can pick any 3 flavors of cake that you want, but if you want it to all be chocolate and to be kind of unusual, you might pick 3 that go together. You'll need 2 bags of the powdered confectioner's sugar, and you can choose. You either need to make 2 of the 9-inch or 8-inch cake rounds for each cake mix, or you need to make 1 of the very large cake pans. I'm doing one of these for each of the cake mixes, so I just have to make 3 cakes instead of having to make 6 and assemble them. I'm actually going to split these. So you need what's called a cake leveler. It has a wire. I don't know a way to get around that. You need that. Wilton makes one. I use the 16-inch Wilton featherweight decorating bag as well as the large icing tip. I enjoy that a lot. And then I have this item here. You do not need these 3 items, okay? I will show you how to do it with and without that. You'll also need, for the icing, you will need the imitation almond extract. Wilton makes one, and the butter flavor as well that they make, and the vanilla. You don't have to use theirs because we're making chocolate icing. You don't have to use colorless. However, that's what Wilton makes, and that's why they're nice. They're colorless. You need some vegetable shortening, a little bit of flour, some Crisco oil if you're making the mixes. You also will need eggs probably if you're using the same mix as I am. A bowl, a measuring cup that measures different levels within a cup. These spatulas I use for icing. I have a whisk, a spatula for actually getting it out of the bowl, and then you don't have to use a tablespoon, but it's what I like to use for the flour. That's everything that you'll need besides the eggs. So definitely pull open the blog that I have listed in the description box, and you'll be able to see the recipes for the icing, the instructions on making the cake mix, because my cake mixes call for 3 eggs and I only use 2, makes them moister. I don't know why, a friend told me this. And you'll also see a list of all of the tools that you'll need in case I forgot one. Okay, here we go. Alright, you may have been convinced by someone to use Pam on your pans. I do not use Pam. I do not use the spray ones that have flour in them on the pans either, because the release on the pans is important for this project. And so I always use a little Crisco oil, vegetable oil shortening, on the outside with my fingers. I just get it all in there, and then I put a little flour in here and I kind of bang it around until it's completely coated in flour. And I always get my pans, my cakes to release when they're fully cooked, so I recommend it. Once you get your cake mix mixed just like you like, put it inside of your pan. I also like to give the batter a little bit of a tap to get the air bubbles out. The other important thing is Wilton sells these things called bake even strips. This is what they look like. Okay, they have a little pin. Do you see the little pin? I have 2 of them on the big pan. You only need 1 bake even strip if you're using the smaller pans. I take those strips, I fold them up, I put them inside this water glass, I let them soak for a few minutes, and then I put them on here. They are wet, they are not drippy. I don't wring them out, but I kind of get all the drips out. What that does is keep your cake from crowning really high in the center. If you've ever seen a cake do that you've made and then you ice it, it's really hard to stack them when you do that. In it goes. Alright, so my cake is cooking. Once it comes out, I will put it on the baking rack in the pan. I set my timer for another 15 minutes, let it cool before I flip it over. When I flip it over, I let it sit for another 15 minutes. Then I wrap it in saran wrap. I put it on top of one of those cake rounds that I showed you, and I put it inside the freezer. So I already have 2 cooked. That'll be 3 that's in the oven. That helps lock in the moisture, but more importantly, it'll help you when you want to use your cake leveler. I freeze them even if I'm serving them same day. Sometimes they don't get fully frozen, but having them hard will produce fewer crumbs when you use the cake leveler. You'll see. All right, so we finished our cake, and when it comes out, it will be fairly flat, as you can see here, and that's because of those bake even strips again. So that's great. So now I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes so that it can cool on the rack. And again, once it's finished, I will flip it upside down on the baker rack and let it cool for another 15 minutes before I wrap it in saran wrap, put it on some flat surface. I use the baking rounds that you actually serve the cake on. I have extra ones, and because I use saran wrap, they don't get dirty. Put it in the freezer, and once they've been in the freezer for at least 30 minutes, then you can fool with them. But I mean, I recommend you could even leave them in overnight, it's fine, but several hours is best. Anyway, let's get started on our icing while that's cooling. And here is what you'll need for your icing. I have a large mixing bowl, 2 bags of powdered sugar because I make extra icing. You never want to run out of icing. It'll end up being 2 different colors if you make 2 batches. So I've got our salt, I've got chocolate flavoring. You can use whatever you'd like. It's just ground chocolate. This one's the Ghirardelli sweet cocoa. You can also use Hershey's. I like Hershey's too. And we have our vegetable oil, our 3 flavorings that I talked about at the beginning of the video. You'll need a teaspoon measuring spoon for that, and then you'll need a teaspoon and a tablespoon measure for your water. We'll also be using our spatula and our 2 cake decorating spatulas for this activity. I'll be using the Wilton cake decorating recipe, and I will post that on my blog so you'll be able to see that, but in case you'd like to see it here, just pause the video and you can read it. Note that I do not use meringue powder when I'm making the icing the way that I'm doing it today, and it's because I'm going to be doing a rough icing job on this cake instead of a clean one, because I want you to see what you can do with as few ingredients as possible. However, the meringue powder is fabulous. I recommend using it. You also need to know how to ice the cake with this icing. So that recipe I showed you on the previous page right here is their icing recipe. However, you will need to mix it using these specifications. You'll need to add 2 teaspoons of water for each cup of stiff consistency icing, which is what that recipe made. This recipe yields 3 cups, so 3 times 6 means that you will need to add 6 teaspoons of water for each batch that you make. We'll be making 2 batches, so you'll need to add 12 of these, 12 teaspoons. So the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of water. So when we make our 2 batches, we'll put in 4 tablespoons of water for our 2 batches, and then we'll need to put in 12 teaspoons of water as well to end up with the right consistency to ice the cake. If you've ever iced a cake, you'll know that the consistency is everything. Too stiff and it tears your cake apart. Too loose, it falls right off the sides. This is a great recipe. It's affordable, it's buttercream, it tastes amazing. I recommend trying it if you haven't already. Otherwise, just go buy the other icing and use the techniques that I'm showing you to make a beautiful cake with the simplest ingredient. Alright, so I've put my 2 cups of Crisco inside the pan right here. As you can see, I've already made a mess. I encourage you to make a mess. You also need your 2 tablespoons per batch of water, and so I'll be putting in 4 tablespoons of water. 2, 3, 4, because we're doubling the recipe. You'll also, according to the recipe, you will need 1 tablespoon of the Wilton flavoring. Now the way that's going to work out, okay, is you're going to be doing 2 parts, 1 part, 1 part to give you 4 parts of your flavorings. So your teaspoon is going to be half a teaspoon, quarter teaspoon per batch. I've doubled it, okay? So I've done a full teaspoon of the vanilla, a half a teaspoon of the butter, and a half a teaspoon of the almond, and we're just going to pour those in. I've pre-measured those. Once you have all of your wet ingredients in, we will be mixing the wet ingredients on a high speed into our mixer. That's on speed 2 on my KitchenAid mixer. You can use whatever you'd like to mix it. Handheld will work as well. Alright, your goal is this fluffy, silky, shiny mixture that I'm showing you. You can see the difference in where it might go. See how it got shinier? That's your goal. Alright, now we're going to be adding our 12 teaspoons of water, our pinch of salt, and our cocoa, And I did 1.5 cups since I am doubling the mixture. And then the recipe calls for a 2-pound bag or approximately 4 cups of confectioner's sugar. The bag that I'm using is a 2-pound bag. However, as you can see, I haven't even finished filling it and we are well over 4 cups. From experience, I'll tell you, I just put the whole bag in, I don't measure it. I do a 2-pound bag, period. If I need to add more water, I add it a teaspoon at a time, let it mix, and keep going. Because we're adding cocoa, you will have to add more than the 12 teaspoons of water to make it the right consistency. And I will count and I will tell you how many that I end up adding. So let's start mixing. I recommend mixing them in alternating each item. So go ahead and add all the water, but you want to add some powdered sugar, let it mix. Add some powdered sugar, let it mix. I don't add the cocoa until the end. I add some cocoa, I let it mix. Add some cocoa, let it mix. 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup at a time is usually a good place to start if you're not comfortable with this activity. And I do want to warn you that if you add it too fast, you will have a puff of cloud of powdered sugar or cocoa up your nose. So look out. All right. Once everything's in, you will notice that it looks kind of a light chocolatey color. You can add more cocoa for a darker color. I kind of like it the lighter color because it contrasts with the darker cake. Now I did add an extra 8 teaspoons of water after I added the chocolate mix because it started to get kind of thick. And what you want is an icing where the spatula will stand up in it and not fall over, but you don't want it so thick that when you put it on it tears the cake. I'll show you what I mean. So this is what I was talking about. When you put your spatula in, it should remain upright, but not be so stiff that you can't just, flick around, okay? What you wouldn't want is for it to be like floppy, That's too thin. Got some on my hands. All right, now I'm gonna show you how to level a cake and assemble it with icing. All right, leveling a cake. Sounds crazy. It will make your cake look beautiful, I promise. So here's your cake leveler, and here's your cake. I have mine on the 9th notch. I'll show you what a notch looks like. These wires move up and down. You do want to make sure you're on the same notch for each side. I usually choose to level it right above this line here, this bake line. Okay, so I keep my edge intact, but I lose some of the top. Because my cakes are not too unlevel, but they do have that rounded edge. See, so we're just gonna take off the muffin top. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, we're gonna put our level down. This is one of my frozen cakes. All right. Once you get it into where you need it, it'll go pretty easy. You just wiggle it back and forth until the top comes off the cake. Because it's frozen, it's a little bit more difficult, but the nice thing is it actually will have fewer crumbs once you begin to assemble it. Now this is one way to figure out if your oven is level or not. You may think your oven cooks level. However, when you bake a cake, it's going to be higher on one side than the other. And you won't know until you actually bake a cake that you have this issue. I'm told there is a way to level your oven. Now, if you have a big, strong man, I recommend you having him do that for you. Otherwise, get a cake leveler. It's cheaper and requires less nagging. Alright, so when you take it off, it should come off in a fairly large piece. Now, my cake is cold. It's not frozen. So I did end up with 2 crumbs there. Now here's where you have 2 options, okay? And because you've baked 3 cakes, you can choose to have a 3-layer cake or a 6-layer cake. I'm going to show you how to do a 6-layer cake today because it sounds crazy, and when you tell people you made a 6-layer cake, they're going to be like, a 6-layer cake? It's chocolate? I love chocolate. 6 layers, and it's going to look amazing. So then you're going to need to cut your cake with the leveler one more time. You'll need to kind of figure out where the center of that first cake is, we just took the top off, is, and then you're going to want to look at your wires and get them in the right spot so they hit in the middle of the cake, and then you're going to want to basically do what we did with the leveler, but you're going to take the cake in half. Alright, I have put my leveler on the 2nd notch because that's going to be the center of my cake, and we're going to try not to suck the saran wrap back in with it. And same thing we did to the top. Next we're going to fill our icing bag. Now I've got my icing tip, as you can see, in my bag, okay, in my 16-inch featherweight Wilton bag. And I use a large cup because that makes it easier to fit the featherweight bag on and actually get the icing into this bag. So we have our icing inside of our bag with our tip. all ready to go. And we have our 6th layer, our bottom layer. I do twist the end. Now, if you don't want to use a bag and a tip, that's fine. You'll need to put a heaping amount right in the center and then work it out, okay? Don't ever get to where you have a thin spot with no icing on it. Put tons of icing on it and then you're going to scrape it off. And I'm going to show you how to scrape it off once you get it on there. I do a similar technique with this. This just makes it a lot easier to apply and you have fewer crumbs to work with. Because we're doing a rough cake, it'll be okay if you have some crumbs, so don't stress. Now the way this works with the cake turner and the icing is that if you apply the right pressure, it will spin itself. That's why these tools are rather nice. You can see where I lifted the tip off and it lifted the icing up. So you'll want to watch your tip for crumbs. I do recommend actually going over on your edge. You can see I've done that right here. Places where I haven't, I probably will do the icing thicker and kind of push it out because that's going to be the cake we're doing today. You do need to fill in the middle. Again, it's okay to pile on the icing. You can always take some off. Harder to get it back on after you've finished. Alright, so we've got a bunch of icing in there now, right? Bring your icing bowl back over. I recommend using this flat spatula, although there are people that prefer this curved one. I usually use that just on the top, not as important on the bottom. When you do this, you'll want to not only flatten around and turn, you'll also want to be thinking about pushing out, don't push in. So we're going to be turning, 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 taking off the extra. Alright, get the idea? Turning, because we kind of want that roughness coming off the edge there. So you can always add a little bit more, like that, if you feel like you're getting too thin. Don't ever let it get too thin, okay? Doesn't have to be perfect. That's what's great about this cake. It's gonna look amazing. Don't worry about the bubbles and the roughness. It's how it's supposed to look, okay? Once you get it all of the places that you want it, you can start making the layer a little thinner. We don't want to use all of our icing on this one layer. All right, we're gonna repeat this for all 6 layers, friends. I'm not alternating my chocolate layers. I'm going to do my 2 milk chocolate layers together, my 2 devil's food layers, and my 2 chocolate fudge layers side by side all the way up the cake. However, you can feel free to alternate them or do whatever flavors that you would like. So that first layer is iced like that. See how rough it is on the edge? I love it. That's what we're going for. You want it to stick out and be just crazy oozy goozy looking. And as you saw from the side, it's fairly flat. Okay, now we're going to add our second layer. We're just going to keep on trucking. I do like to get down a little low, make sure it's fairly even. Okay, fill my icing bag up and do the second layer. Alright, so all 6 of our layers are assembled and each layer has icing in between and there's a layer of icing on top. I do recommend, as you're taking the icing off each time, making sure that you make the layer thin enough that you have plenty of icing for the entire cake. If you're concerned that you want lots of icing, I would triple the recipe on the icing to ensure that you have enough. I don't think you need 3, however, might be a good idea. This is what our finished cake looks like. I did take my spatula and set it right here on the edge and then turn the cake turner as in this direction so that it drug kind of like a record player all the way around just to give me this rough look. And the sides look rough as well. Now you can stop here. This is a beautiful cake. It's huge and I think people will enjoy this crazy piece of cake. It's meant to look rough. You know, keep it rough. However, if you're wanting it to look kind of festive, a recommendation that I have is to take any cookie cutter that you like, place it in the center of your cake, and then I have already grated some of this Candy Quick, which is just white chocolate. I'm going to take this white chocolate and fill in the heart here. So I filled in with my white chocolate. I'm just going to spread it out so it's fairly even inside of my cookie cutter and kind of pat it down just a little bit so it stays put. Now note that I've put tons in here, so when I remove this cookie cutter, it's going to fall a little bit to the side. The idea, again, is for this cake to look rough. Don't make it look perfect. See how I'm getting some little, that's all fine, do that. You can also use powdered sugar for this, however, it's not as heavy and it's likely to blow around on your cake, especially if you plan on transporting it. Alright, let's remove our cookie cutter And now you have your little heart. So now you have your rough cake with your pretty little heart in the middle, all messy and crazy. If you even want to do something else, feel free to drizzle chocolate all over it. It's really good with ice cream, definitely with a glass of milk. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Feel free to check out my other videos that I've made on cake decorating, and also subscribe to the channel so that you can watch our daily vlog. My family and I live in Texas, and we'd love to share our lives with you. Thanks guys, bye.